think we might be casting League of Legends completely wrong. And I want to give you a couple of clips here so we can take and see an example of what I mean. But one of the things that I think is really nice about other games like CSGO and the way that it's cast is, and it has a lot to do with the fact that the game is just more simple and straightforward to understand for a casual viewer. But that actually means that for a game like League or a MOBA, the casters need to actually do an even better job of bringing people in who maybe have tuned in, see that there's a big event going on, a Worlds, a Finals, something like that, and they maybe don't understand the game. And these events, and the reason why Riot invests so much money into a losing, industry and space, is to promote the game and also to provide something to the players who play the game that they can really enjoy in the esport, and the hope that it will grow into the future, obviously. But the idea here is that you really want to bring people in, and when you cast in a way that is completely unintelligible to even a casual player, let alone someone, who hasn't played the game at all, it really, I think, pushes people away. It causes people to not end up watching and definitely to not come play the game. So I think that other games do a great job of, casting in a way that is kind of generic, highlights what are amazing plays and important moments, without getting so stuck in terminology and ability names and things like that. And that's the biggest problem that I want to focus on, is ability names. There has become, I think, kind of an internal culture among casters who work in the LCS and even probably in other leagues, where it seems like over the years, casters have prided themselves on a real way that they can show that they know more and are better at what they do than anyone else, which is memorizing all of the ability names in the game. I can tell you, as somebody who's hit Challenger, here in NA, who has been playing the game since Season 2, I do not know the majority of the ability names in the game. When we play and we're casually talking with our friends, or maybe if you're even listening into comms, in a team game of League, we're referring to abilities as people's ults, their R, their Q, their W, their E, because as a player, that's the way that you play the game. And I'm not saying that you necessarily cast that way either, but there are a lot of more broad terms that you can use, or generic words that you can use, like rather than saying the specific name of a crowd control ability, you can just say, you can say that they got CC'd, you can say that they're stunned, things like that make it a little bit easier for a casual viewer to know what's going on in the game. And even for a veteran viewer or a veteran player like myself, because half the time I'm listening to a team fight, it sounds like a word salad of all these ability names that I'm not even that familiar with. Some of them I know, maybe I've learned some of them over the years from watching the casters do this, but it just seems like an internal ego battle between the casters to see who has memorized more ability names and can say more ability names the quickest during the middle of a team fight, rather than actually highlighting the highs and the lows of the team fight, who's winning, who's getting low, and who's dying. You just couldn't tell really what's happening without an extensive knowledge of ability names. And so let's get into some clips here and actually take a look. So this is a team fight. I tried to pull up recent stuff. So this is a team fight from a match between FlyQuest and Shopify. So this was, even though I have here, I was looking for the finals. That'll be the next clip. So this is a clip from the playoffs. It was one of the last few playoff series leading up to the finals, but this was between FlyQuest and Shopify. Obviously, the finals was between FlyQuest and 100 Thieves, so that'll be the next clip. And I actually want to highlight, so this is same caster, and in the same era, right? Just one series back to back, I think, from each other. And let's take a look at these two different team fights and how I think in one of them there's an overemphasis on ability names and a lack of clarity and emotion on what's going on, what plays are good. There's not a highlight of the moment. And then another team fight where actually the play-by-play casting ends up dropping a lot of the ability names and focusing on what's happening with the players and stuff like that. And I think it goes a lot better. So let's listen to these two team fights.
So no shockwave available for an upcoming team fight. FlyQuest are going to notice that and move forward here with the Herald smited down by Contract. The fight begins. Cyclone already cast for that first usage. Contracts gets back away as the clone is the only thing to fall so far. Fudge goes all out. Whippo might just be the target here. A Tempered Fate only onto one as B-Boy has to flash and cleanse to try to get away, but the first blood belongs to Quad. Seos is down. Shopify Rebellion. They may have claimed the Herald, but they have to sacrifice their support and plenty of summoners.
So you hear a lot of things there. I don't even remember all of them. There's like the Cyclone, which is Wukong ult. You've got Fudge going all out, which is, Cassante ult. I think Bard Tempered Fate is Bard's ult. I'm a support main, I barely know that. So it just seems like, and then we're talking about like Flash and Cleanse and all this stuff. And it just seems to me like and this isn't even the most egregious example. I just pulled this up because it's a recent match, that was easy to find real quickly here. But you can see how there is a lack of emphasis on, if you're listening to this fight and not watching it, do you even know who's winning the fight? Do you know what's going on with any of the players and things like that? And it seems like there's this attempt to spam as much terminology as possible and not create that much hype. These teams, I get that this was like, a kind of non-eventful team fight in a way, because it just went 1-0. So it's not like an amazing team fight. It's also at the start of this series where, it's 0-0. So maybe there's a little bit less hype. But imagine you're watching this game live and there's not a lot of action between pro teams. And so for 16 and a half minutes, nothing has happened. No one has died. And then you get this full 5-on-5 team fight. And what you hear is, Contracts uses Cyclone on Wukong, Busio uses Tempered Fate on Bard, Fudge goes all out with his ult, and whoever, I don't even know who has Flash Cleanse. Oh, B-Voy, the Varus, B-Voy has to use Flash Cleanse. Like, if that's what I hear, I'm just a little bit disappointed that that's what I got after 16 and a half minutes. Now let's take a look at this other team fight. This wasn't the craziest team fight either, actually, I don't think.
Find it. Arctic Assault back over the wall towards the team. Quid tries to escape. Whippo's in the middle of everybody. 1v4 Aatrox, and it's the 4 who are struggling.
So this is the same caster. There's both Captain Flowers, but listen to the difference here already, right? Like, we're talking about what's happening with the players and their positioning rather than what ability is being used. And there's some of that, of course, and there's always some of that. But we're talking about Bwipo, kind of going in 1v4 and the 4 people are losing, creates this hype around what Bwipo is doing the moment. And it tells you what's going on with the players' positioning, who's winning the fight, and how strong people are and that sort of thing. And so there's a lack of emphasis on ability names through this beginning portion of this fight, and it's a focus on positioning, who's winning, what's going on with the players, and trying to almost weave the storyline of the players into the actual game itself. And so the team fight feels more impactful because rather than hearing a list of what abilities are being used, we're hearing what's actually happening in the game and why there's hype and a reason to care.
Whippo just continues going forward as River is exhausted. Whippo staying alive.
Things like movement, like this person's going forward or this person's having to run away or disengage, things like that. These are generic terms, and it's great because not only is it good for players who don't understand the game really well and have no idea what, honestly, I think Braum Glacial Fissure, right? But let's be honest, if they were yapping about Glacial Fissure here, the Braum ult coming down, which just hit 2 people here, I don't know that I would know what that means. You know what I mean? And I, especially if I was a newer player or I don't have anything to do with Braum or whatever, I just wouldn't know what they're talking about. And so you can create so many more moments that I think would cause more people to watch and would bring new players into the game if the casting was less focused on showing how much you know about ability names and more on, creating this story about what's happening with the game itself. When you listen to sports broadcasts and things like that, one thing that they do a really good job of most of the time is trying to make it so that even if you're not watching the game, you can still understand what's happening. So like if you listen to a baseball broadcast or you listen to a football broadcast, it's like the announcers are doing this job of almost like a radio broadcast where their play-by-play is allowing you to know what's happening. Even if you're not able to watch the screen at that moment, it can attract your attention back because you know what's happening, cause you to tune in if you're doing something else. And that may be especially true if you're on the computer and you're doing something else at the same time and listening to the game in the background. You need to instantly be able to identify, for example, that a moment is happening and that you want to tune back into the game and see what's going on when some action picks up or something like that. I think probably plenty of people watch the LCS while doing something else, nowadays, and want to tune back in when something's happening. So you need to know that. So it's this kind of casting that I think can really make League be a lot more clear, have a lot more clarity compared to other ways that it's been cast in the past or other games even. Because League's a really complicated game. There's a lot going on, and it's really hard, obviously, because of that. For it to succeed as like a decent spectator event or sport, because how can you know what's going on if you don't play this? Whereas I can go and I can watch those Counter-Strike games and I can know what's going on because the game itself is just fairly straightforward. But the casting helps with this. And when you can't make the game more simple, especially without major changes, this is what you can do from an esports perspective to make the game more approachable.
Big Dokes goes in for the three-man stun, but it ain't gonna be enough. Dokes already down. Nice.
See, things like, so Dokla went in for a three-man stun, right? Like, rather than saying, that Dokla went in, he used Counter-Strike, you can say these things and show that you know what the ability name is, but it's so much more impactful to say, Dokla goes in for a three-man stun or something like that than to say Dokla used Counter-Strike on three people. So things like that matter a lot.
Quad, a double kill from Asu as FBI falls. Quad just continues charging in. This snake has fangs, and 100 Thieves don't have the antidote. FlyQuest pick up 2, and they're making their way over to Baron.
And Captain Flowers is great. I mean, obviously he does an amazing job, casting. And so things like he said at the end, like about Quad on Cassiopeia here, that this snake has fangs and 100 Thieves don't have the antidote. Like, those lines are really good, and they don't really have, actually it does have to do a little bit with game knowledge, but like, or lore or whatever, because maybe a little bit about Cassiopeia, sort of. But it's like, that kind of commentary and that kind of play-by-play is so much better than ability name, ability name, ability name, ability name. And I get you're going to use some of that, or you're going to need to do maybe a little bit of that to elevate the cast a little bit above. If you listen to somebody who's like casting the game at a very amateur level and they're not using the player names, they're using the champion names, or they're, although there's an argument to be made there actually about that, because when people are watching, if you're not familiar with the players, if you are not, if you don't know the difference between Quid or Quad, right, and you're watching, maybe saying Rise or Cassiopeia is maybe in some ways better, but there's a big argument to be had there, because I think it should be about the players and the narratives and stuff like that. And then if you do know the players and you are a fan of the players, it sounds really amateurish to be saying the champion names. But the point here is that I get that when you listen to an amateur cast or an amateur broadcast, they're not using ability names because they don't know them. They're not using player names because they don't know them. And they're casting a bunch of people they're unfamiliar with. But just because those things are done in an amateur broadcast doesn't mean that they're inherently bad or why the broadcast is bad. And so another thing that they do, aside from just spamming ability names, and this can be also a good or a bad thing, but sometimes there's an attempt to say a bunch of things just because you want to show off how fast you can talk, rather than because it's actually necessary, building hype in the moment or adding anything to the broadcast. So I'll see a lot of times, maybe especially with someone like Captain Flowers, who's very good at talking very quickly, that he'll flood the zone and, just kind of spam away. And sometimes, right, it's really good. Like in this team fight, I think there were moments where he's going really fast. I actually didn't have an example of that here in either of these two clips, but sometimes you'll be talking really fast and it'll be in combination with the ability names thing. You'll just be spamming a bunch of ability names really quickly. And it's just, you're talking fast to show off that you can talk fast and that you can list abilities fast, but you're not actually using the fact that you can talk fast to create hype, because a lot is happening, action's happening, that's why I'm talking so fast, or to actually convey important information that's like clear to the audience about what's happening. So I see this as a problem. So I wanted to go back to and look at, obviously this is just a more hype moment as well, so this is going to come off maybe, better. But I wanted to take a look at, one of Doublelift's plays, the classic, kind of Lucian ult play here. And, this was an older era of League. So in the cast, there was some ability names, and technical things mentioned, but really what I feel like is a very appropriate amount, and focus on how much they talk about like people living or dying, these kind of generic basic things that you would think, oh, well, that, if you're just talking about who's getting killed in a team fight, like that's just such a basic thing, or it's such a, like a low level, thing to just talk about who's dying and who's getting kills and stuff like that. Like you're not really adding a whole lot, like, duh, we can see that. But actually what you think about when you have 10, 15 seconds during a team fight to provide the information about what's happening, you're going to emphasize the things that are the most hype, maybe a really good play, a really good ability usage, a big ult or a big CC. You're going to highlight like this person dying or this person getting a kill or a bunch of kills, like this person goes down. Those are the important things that are happening. And actually that's what the focus should be about. So for example, if you have a team fight and, 7 people die, and I hear, 10 ability names during that team fight cast, and I heard, 2 times somebody said somebody went down and died, I feel like there's actually a misfocus away from what's happening in the team fight and onto here's all this game knowledge and terms that we're throwing at you.
No Guardian Angel for Meteos, whereas TSM still have 2.
The Weaver's Wall!
Weaver's Wall catches off a couple. Now can they have the follow-up damage? A couple of stuns come in. They've got Bjergsen, and they shut him down with a 1600 damage crit. Double low. Meteos, another knockup, trades his life, but it does. Gets the GA. Double killing them all. Kills everybody. They've got 3. Impact goes down, and A's for TSM.
Doublelift turns around the fight, staying alive, so much patience, bides his time.
So let's take a look at like some of the basics here. So we have things like one of the hype moments that comes up. They're talking about some things, right? Like they're talking about who has Guardian Angel and who doesn't. Technically, like Guardian Angel, it's kind of like an item name, or, I get that it's a little bit technical. I don't care. It's really relevant information, really important thing to point out. So I don't have any problem with that. The Weaver's Wall coming in. This, I think, is a really great example. So the wall comes in from Taliyah, right? This is a huge part of what's happening in this team fight. And the way that they cast it is with this, huge emphasis on the Weaver's Wall coming in. I don't really mind them calling it Weaver's Wall because it implies what it is enough in the ability name that we know what's going on, right? But imagine if, let's just switch some ult names around, for example. Imagine if Taliyah's ult, instead of being named Weaver's Wall, instead of having wall in the name, was called something like, you could call it like Cassante's ult. Like you could call it All Out, like, so Taliyah's going all out or something like that. Or, we call it something else. Like, let's say if it was called, like Rock Prison or something like that. Like, I just don't know if that would convey the same thing, especially to someone kind of casually viewing the game, if it didn't have the name Wall in it. So it's fortunate here that when we mention the Weaver's Wall coming out, that everyone knows what that is because of the fact that it has Wall in it. But if the name was just named something different, or with other champions in different situations, you have an ult or an ability where the name isn't really telling you exactly what's going on, and so it's not helpful to cast using the ability name. It's better to say, the wall or something like that. Like let's look up, for example, really quickly, we can look up a wall like Anivia. What is Anivia's wall called? Crystallize, right? Like if you're casting and Anivia puts up a big wall and you call that thing crystallize, like, Anivia used crystallize or something like that. Like that is just going to sound awful. No one's going to know what you're talking about, right? And it's going to fall really flat. So it's very fortunate, right, that they use the ability name, but the ability name is a really good indicator, and it's it's aptly named, so it's a wall coming out. There's big emphasis on that, obviously, because it's a huge part of what's going on in this team fight, and it's catching out a couple of people, like they said. They're talking about follow-up damage, not about ability names, not about Jin. So Jin Q is like what? A bouncing grenade or something like that, dancing grenade. So they don't say, Jin hits them with the dancing grenade, because that would sound really bad even if you knew what that was. Instead, they said, they're hitting them with the follow-up damage, right? Easy to comprehend, easy to understand. We know what's going on. They don't have to say, Impact uses whatever Megan RW is. He did, we can look that one up. I don't even know how to see it on here. I don't even know what I'm looking at here. Jeez. Oh, there we go. Okay, there's a separate set. It's called Wallop. Is that even right? Wallop. Okay, so we don't say, Nar hits him with the wallop or Impact hits him with the wallop. That would sound so dumb. He hits him with a wallop of daisy. He puts the sour cream right on him. We don't say that, right? We say they hit him with the follow-up CC. Okay, then they say they've got Bjergsen, right? Because Bjergsen's just died. He's the, I guess Smoothie died actually here on the Braum, but and that didn't get mentioned, but that's okay. They shut him down with the 1600 crit is maybe not the best follow-up. I mean, obviously, it's play-by-play. You're right in the moment. Not every line is going to be perfect. He's just, he's continuing to flow. No one else has died or anything like that. Probably would have been better to say that, like, Meteos is coming in. He, like they're C9's going in. Meteos is coming in onto Svenskeren here. Something like that would have been a little bit better, but he's just still thinking about Bjergsen dying and that he got blown up really quickly. And then they say, can they get double lift? Because they're coming in. Double lift is low. Meteos, another knock-up. So again, we don't say the ability name. We just say, Meteos. So that was actually the line I was looking for there, which is Meteos was coming in to get another knockoff off. He knew he was going to go in and die there, but he was trying to get in and get another knock-up off on the Rek'Sai there. So we don't call that, Meteos doesn't go in and unburrow. Meteos goes in to try to get another knock-up off. He doesn't catch double lift. They get the GA. Double lift's alive here. Double lift is low. Double lift is killing them all. He kills everybody. They've got 3. Impact goes down and ace for TSM. It's very focused on, once the fight becomes about double lift, the commentary switches from, any other shenanigans, and this was already fine, but it shifts to focusing on where the action is. So you have to follow the action. The action in this team fight is like, we'll just watch it blind for a second without the commentary. The action is the wall comes in, they're trapped, there's follow-up CC on them, they're trapped against the wall, they're dying. Meteos comes back in to try to get a knock-up on Doublelift. He doesn't get him. Doublelift is staying alive. Doublelift is killing them all. That's the action, right? So obviously I'm not a commentator, so I'm not going to do the same job that they're doing, but nor was I trying to there. But the point is those are the main moments that you want to get across during the team fight, because that's what happens in this team fight is the wall goes up, people get trapped against the wall. Meteos tries to get back in and trade his life for another knockup. He doesn't get onto Doublelift. Doublelift stays alive. He's low. He's killing them all. That's the action. That's what you want to get across through the commentary. If you're spending all your time talking about Weaver's Wall, Wallop, and Unburrow and all this shenanigans, to most people, when they hear that, even though you're saying the same thing, the terms mean the same thing. The Wallop means the follow-up CC when they're trapped against the wall. The Unburrow means the same thing as trying to get the knockup onto Doublelift, but it doesn't really convey the same information, even to a long-time player, a veteran player or something like that. So you come in and you've been, you've been playing League for years, you've been watching esports for years, and you listen to this and you have no idea what they're talking about. And that's sort of the problem, is if they cast it like that, you lose the understanding of what's going on. And you even get bogged down in the weeds, because a lot of times these names are long. They're not easy to string together, to remember all of them, to say as quickly in some cases as other things. And so it's not always the best thing to say. And you maybe miss out on conveying other information. Like you say, if you want to use the term, like I'll give you an example. If you want to use the term, well, I guess maybe you could use it, but if you want to use the term like Rek'Sai is going to unburrow, right? Or like Meteos is going to look to unburrow, rather than calling it a knockup. Maybe you could string that together like, Meteos is going to try to unburrow onto Doublelift or something like that. And then you convey what's trying to happen is like, he's trying to get onto the Gragas. He's trying to get onto the Lucian here. But I think it's easier to just say, because it's so, what people are used to, so much more of what people are used to hearing is to hear, even if you're familiar that Rek'Sai W is Unburrow or something like that, it's like you're so much more used to hearing something like Meteos is looking for a knockup on Doublelift, or Meteos is going in. And it's so much more precise and succinct than hearing, Meteos is trying to unburrow onto Doublelift. Even if you know what unburrow means, how long does it take you when you're sitting there as a viewer to process, what does that even mean, Meteos is trying to unburrow onto Doublelift? We have to remember that Meteos is playing Rek'Sai. We have to remember what unburrow means. We have to remember that unburrow is going to mean that, he's trying to knock him up. We're just translating, right? We're using a different language because it's not intuitive even for a longtime player. And I'm telling you, if it's not intuitive for me, again, somebody who's been to Challenger, who's been watching League since Season 2 and playing League since Season 2, it's just not going to be intuitive. Take someone who's been playing for a couple of years, or someone who doesn't even play but is watching the World Championship or LCS final or something like that. They've tuned in because it's a big broadcast. They're gonna leave because they have no idea what's happening. And so that's all my point is I think that there's been, in recent years, this expansion of the play-by-play commentary to focus on more ability names and technical terms in a way that's just a detriment to the commentary over the game. And I think it doesn't convey what's happening in the fights. It's not helpful for bringing new players into the game. It's not helpful for even a long-time viewer and listener to understand what's going on in a reasonable way. I think that they should be replacing a lot of words and terminology they're using with more generic language, like, stuns, knockups, crowd control, rather than ability names, like focusing more on players, maybe player names or champion names, even as amateurish as that sounds, rather than focusing on again, those ability names and stuff like that. If you're going to speak quickly, use it to convey more information about what's happening or to create hype, rather than just to show off that you can talk quickly and spam ability names and that sort of thing. And I think that will go a long way for helping the casting in League to improve. Maybe, maybe one day I'll write a little bit of a script here and we'll go through one of these team fights together, and I'll show you how it's done and what it looks like. But, until then, good luck in solo queue and have a wonderful day.